Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today we're connecting with Thomas Hendrickson of Vior Outdoors. Thomas is a lifelong hunter. Now, granted, he's only 23, but he's put down more elk than me and all of my buddies combined. So he's an impressive gentleman, and beyond that, he's starting his new outdoor media company, and they have an awesome giveaway coming up. You can find out more about the giveaway at the end of this podcast, so make sure you listen to the whole thing. So that being said, I don't want to steal any of Thomas's thunder, so we're going to go ahead and let Thomas tell you some of his stories. Thank you. All right, Thomas, welcome to the Hunting Stories podcast, brother. How you doing?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
I am doing well, man. I'm doing well. I want to say thank you very much for jumping on with me tonight. I can very officially say, and I don't know if anyone will ever beat this record, but you are the fastest from like communication to actually recording a podcast. And there's a good reason for that. You have a pretty massive giveaway going on with your organization, and I'll let you get into that. But I want to say just thank you, man, for giving me your time. I'm excited to hear some of your stories. So why don't we kick this thing off by letting the people know who they're hearing stories from tonight?
So my name is Thomas Hendrickson. I started Vior Outdoors not too long ago, which is why we're launching with the giveaway. But I love elk hunting. And on Vior, we have a couple of different guys on our team, but right now we're launching an archery elk giveaway, which is kind of my passion. And so that's kind of what we're getting into with this podcast. And I reached out to you about the giveaway, and then we got in touch real fast. That was pretty crazy. I remember you texted me and you're like, hey, we could podcast as early as tonight. I was like, oh crap.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was like less than probably 16 hours from like you reaching out to like this happening. So I'm excited to hear it, man. Yeah. But God, I had a question and I completely spaced it, so we'll just cut that bit out in a little bit. But man, we're here to tell some stories. We'll talk more about, what you're trying to do and your giveaway at the end. But for now, let's tell some hunting stories. Let's start with this. Tell us a little bit more about you in hunting. Like, where did you start hunting? How long have you been doing it?
So I started hunting with my dad really, really young. I remember there's pictures where, my dad's got that little baby vest, baby where you strap. Yeah, you got him strapped to you, and he spray painted it camo, and he took me out. So I went from pretty little, and we did most of our hunting in like Eastern Oregon. And we just did a lot of elk hunting, a lot of deer hunting, and some turkey hunting. We tried our hand at bear, really only because I was a youth, and if there was a bear, we shot it. If there was not a bear, then we didn't do that. But we really like to do elk. And I actually started doing it with a muzzleloader. That was the tag, man. Like, because you could kill.
That's how I started too, man. I actually started hunting in Central Washington, muzzleloader elk. So I know that vibe. Muzzleloader's fun. If anyone's ever I recommend going and shooting a muzzleloader, if not hunting with one, but like a ton of fun to shoot with a giant boom and the poof of smoke, and it's a fun experience. It sucks to clean a muzzleloader, but it's fun. It's fun to shoot them.
And they don't even kick that hard. I would say it's like a 12 gauge shotgun. You know what I mean? Or maybe even less. But they're really fun to hunt with. And the cool thing about the muzzleloader hunts is generally they give you a lot longer to hunt. Like the seasons are going to be like 1 to 3 months.
Oh, really?
And,
in Washington, you get a good amount of time. I think you get a couple weeks in like the beginning of October. In Colorado, you get only 1 week, but that week is prime rut. It is like the smack dab center of September. As I've gone more and more towards archery, I hear more and more how people hate it. But I'm not going to get into that debate. But continue, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. It was in Oregon. It's changed since then, but back when I was doing muzzleloader, it was like first season and second season. And first season lasted from August 1st to like like middle of October, and then it went from middle of October, second season, all the way till December 31st. So you had a long time, and it was 1 mile within any agricultural land over the whole state, and you could shoot a cow. And so that was the tag that I did for a long time. And
That's awesome,
that's
man.
kind of how I got into it. I got 9 elk doing it that way.
Wow.
And
I
we
mean,
got
okay,
one.
I gotta ask, I think you're younger than I am. How old are you that you've already killed 9 elk?
Oh, I'm pretty fortunate. But I'm 23.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say.
Yeah. And I've killed almost 17 elk.
What?
Yeah, I've been really
Wow.
fortunate. I've never not filled the tag.
Okay. All right,
And
Thomas. You're
I
making
don't
me
know if
upset,
it's
bud.
I don't know if it's luck or what, but it's been pretty cool, pretty neat.
Yeah. Well, if nothing else, it says that people need to be paying attention to you when you start to bring out this content that you're going to be putting out there, because you obviously know what you're doing. I've been hunting for like 7 years, and I'm in my 30s, right? But I've only killed half of an elk, so I have a long way to go to catch up with you. I probably never will.
Well, yeah, I think that the biggest misconception is like when people go out and they elk hunt, and there's a lot more pressure, I think, that people put on themselves than is necessary. A lot
Yeah.
of people will, right now especially, there's a lot of people pushing backcountry hunts, and like you got to go 6 miles in,
Yeah.
or the elk hunting is not good, or if elk won't talk, then people are like, oh, it's just they're not ready yet, and so they
Yeah.
just won't go. Or people will go hunt in the morning before work, and they'll go hunt after work, and they won't hunt in the middle of the day, which you got to do what you got to do. But there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, in the hunting realm, the elk hunting realm, especially September season, that I think a lot of people have missed opportunities on.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Yeah, I agree. The elk are always there. They live there, right? They're there 24/7. So you got to put in the time.
Yeah.
But man, 17 elk. Oh my goodness. All right, Thomas. Well, let's hear some of your stories, man. Why don't you set the stage for your first story? Kind of tell us where you are, who you're with, what you're doing, and we'll go from there.
All right. Let's see. Well, let's start with one that was more of a funny story.
Perfect.
I remember my first year, I went out and I was going to go hunt by myself. This was the first year I was going to go hunt by myself. My birthday is a day that my parents always gave me off of school. And so I went out and was going to go, and my dad dropped me off at the top of this mountain and was going to go pick me up after school. And I remember he dropped me off, and it was middle of November. It was a spike tag with a rifle. And I got there, I got out of the truck, I found some tracks, and I started tracking them. And I was like, man, this is the zone. I'm going to get them. And
Yeah.
then I ran up,
Feeling it.
and there were, I could hear them in the brush. And I get ready, I find a good spot where I can set it up just nice, and a deer walks out. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that was embarrassing. It's a good thing nobody was there to see that. And then all of a sudden, like 10 elk walk right past the deer, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you don't see that every day. But there were no spikes. And so I was just sitting there and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then they smell me and they just take off. And I was like, well, that was a pretty good bummer. So I kept walking and kept walking. And I remember I got to the top of this hill where I could see down into this little valley thing. And I get to the top. And once I get to the top, I'm looking through my binoculars, and then like snow starts coming down and visibility is just like nothing.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, that was kind of a waste of time. So I go back, I backtrack, and I'm starting to get a little bit tired now because the snow is a little bit deep. And I go back to where I ran across those elk. And I was like, well, maybe I missed something. And so I started tracking them. And my dad calls me and he's like, well, did you find anything? And I was like, no, I didn't find anything. And as I said that, once I answered the call and as I said that, I just look, and right in between two trees is this spike that's just looking at me. And he's just hearing me talk. And I'm like, crap. So I dropped the phone in the snow and I try to get set up to get this spike. And he takes off. And then I'm like, well, crap, I got to chase him down. But you're never going to chase an elk down. And then I take 10
How far was he?
steps
Like 100 yards, 50 yards?
No, he was like 20. He was like 20 yards. He had to.
It's like if you pulled your rifle up, all you're seeing is brown fur. He's that close.
Yeah, I could have poked him with a stick. Like, I don't know. It was, I was a low of the day. And then I take a couple steps forward to see if, I could get him to stop. And I'm cow calling, trying to get him to stop, take a couple steps forward, realize that I dropped the phone in the snow and don't know where the phone is. So I go back, pick up the phone, hang up with Dad, and take another couple steps. And I just followed him until he bedded down again and just took my time. And then I ended up getting him later that day. But
wow,
that was an interesting experience for sure.
That's pretty awesome. So was that the first time you'd been out there alone, or was that just, one of many times you were out there alone? It just happened to be your birthday.
That was the first time I was there alone because my mom didn't like it, but my dad was like, he's old enough. So that was my first time going out alone. And I always kind of wanted to try to go out alone because, you just want it. It's something that you want to try. It's not necessarily something that you want to do every time, but it's like, that's kind of fun. It's kind of like kudos to you,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
I think
what birthday was that? Like your 17th, 18th, 13th?
Yeah, 16th birthday or so. Yeah, so that was pretty interesting.
That's a pretty awesome story.
Michael,
how long has your dad been hunting? I feel like you have a pretty awesome mentor in your life, and I'm thinking that that's him.
Yeah, he started hunting when he was 16.
Okay.
And he started bow hunting. And that
started with bow hunting. Okay.
He started with bow hunting, and he did it with one of those old Martin bows. I don't know if you ever, but they had it was single cam. And so one was just a circle and then the other one had a cam on it, and they shot 210 feet per second. I remember he used to tell me that if you could hit a paper plate at 30 yards, you were ready to go.
Yeah.
Just because, it was so much different. But, so I started doing it. And when I got into bow hunting, I was like, I don't know. It was either that year or the year after I shot that spike. And I started wanting to get into bow hunting. And when he was saying
that your dad did it, or was there something else that drew you to bow hunting?
It was a bunch of YouTubers born and raised outdoors.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then I was like, man, I've never seen, because we always did the second season muzzleloader tag. So elk don't usually call at that time unless they're in a really big group, and then they're barking at you, and they're running away. And so I didn't really know that. I mean, I knew the elk call, but I didn't know the extent of all the emotion that's put into the rut.
Yeah, for sure.
And I remember watching their videos, and I was like, man, that's crazy. So then I asked my dad about it. My dad was like, oh yeah, we used to do that all the time. You'd just whistle and they would crack off. And I was like,
so
well,
maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but why did your dad switch from archery to more muzzleloader and rifle? Was it just opportunity? Being in Oregon, maybe there was longer seasons for those?
Yeah.
Or was there something else?
I think it was that, because opportunity, because when he got married, and started having kids, he had a job, and then it was just easier, I think, to have 3 months and go out in the morning and at night than it would be to have that archery season.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I do the same thing.
Yeah. And so I think that's why I switched, and that's when I got started. But I love archery hunting so much. It is a different game, a different kind of playing field.
Yeah. I've said this on the podcast before, but like I did not switch for the same reason you did. I started muzzleloader and then I went to archery only because I was like, I don't want to hunt in November anymore. Like this sucks. It's too cold. And so I was like, I'm gonna get a bow and I'm gonna hunt in September when it's a little bit warmer, and I'll figure the rest out. And so then I started, of course, YouTube, Randy Newberg and all the different guys out there, and it was like, wait a minute, this is pretty cool. And I didn't really love archery until I started shooting 3D stuff. So I don't know if you do much 3D shooting, but like going to a shop and shooting 20 yards at a bunch of circles, it's not for me. I couldn't get behind it, and I was like, I go, and I would go occasionally because I was like, I need to be good so when I go hunting. Granted, I've never really shot at any animals, and that's my own problem. We'll not talk about that. But shooting at foam animals in the mountains, all of a sudden I was like, this is amazing. Like I love this, and hopefully I can translate that over to actual critters and hunting seasons. But archery's pretty special, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I like doing 3D stuff too. I don't much care for target practice, in my opinion, but I think a lot of that has to do with broadheads. I think practicing with broadheads is way underutilized, and so I like to do 3D shoots and stuff, but I like to do it with my broadheads. People look at me funny, but
yeah, I know. I think every place I've ever been would say just no, they're not allowed to do broadheads, but I think you're probably right.
Some of them
arrows fly different.
Yeah, some of them do allow different things, but and I would definitely check that before you go to a 3D shoot.
You show up to tack with nothing, which is total archery challenge for the people that don't know. But you show up with a bunch of broadheads, they will not let you up.
They'll kick you out. Yeah.
That's good, man. Well, what else you got for us, Thomas? I always get off track with miscellaneous things and talking about, obviously the stuff that we all love, but we're here to hear stories. So do you got any other good ones for us?
Yeah. Let's see. I can say that, let's start with archery hunting. 3 years ago or 2 years ago is when I started getting to know the elk nut. If you don't know the elk nut, his name is Paul Medell. That guy is like a wizard. He is from McCall, Idaho, and he had elk coming on his property. And long story short, he just fed the elk, kept them on his property year round, and like recorded all the behaviors that they had and the noises that they made when they were in certain situations, and then kind of like designed a language for elk hunting and figured out how to call them in.
It's pretty awesome. He has for those that don't know, he has an app.
Yes.
What is it called? The Elk Nut? Is that
the
right?
Elk Nut app.
Yeah, I listen to it every day. I listen to it. I practice with it. So I drive about 20 minutes to the gym every morning. So I get about 40 minutes to and back, right? 20 and 20. And I'm calling in my truck every morning listening to Paul Medell. And another thing, and I've never said this on the podcast, but people love telling their hunting stories. Every person I've ever asked to be on this podcast that I've actually gotten a hold of, that my message didn't fall into wherever, they never saw it. Paul's the only person that said no, thank you. So he's my like unicorn. He's the guy that I want to get on this podcast because he's the only person to say no so far. And I've got some pretty big people lined up in the future. But Paul Medell, if you guys don't know him, check him out. He's an elk whisperer. Wouldn't you say, Thomas?
Yeah, he is. He's good. And he's actually going to be on our, so we're going to be offering master classes, and long story short, he's going to be on there. So that'll
tell him to hit
really
me up,
cool.
Man.
Yeah.
Like I said, he's my unicorn. I got to get him on here. If you ever watch any of his stuff, like the Elk Collective, he's got a bunch of courses on there on the Elk Collective, and he tells some amazing stories. And I'd love to have him on and hear some of his stories. But
yeah, no, that was a game changer.
Yeah.
And so
let's go to your story. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're all good. So my first couple of years archery hunting, I shot the regulations in Oregon were that you could shoot any bull with a bow. And so my first 2 years, I shot spikes. And then my third year, I shot a raghorn. And then my next year, I started listening to Paul, and I started watching his things. And, like I did kind of the same thing. I listened to it every day, and I would practice and I'd practice. And I got pretty decent at it. And I started to realize that he was right. And it wasn't just, it started to be like this chess game that you would have with elk. And it was like, you not only could you call in different elk at different times of the day and in different moments of the rut, but you could choose. And I found myself being able to choose whether I called in cows or spikes or raghorns or mature bulls. And so that was a really cool season. And I feel like I remember, we keep track of this every year, but my first couple of years, I don't know if I called anything in on purpose, but that year we called in like 56 bulls to bow range.
Shit.
under 50 yards, and like within bow range.
This is all in Oregon, or do you hunt multiple states?
This is all in Oregon.
All right.
And so that was really neat. But the other thing to remember about that is I had a lot of experience with the muzzleloader, and it was all in the same area. So I knew where the elk were, and I just got in there and was able to call at them. And I remember this year we were doing a lot of that. And we called in a little herd that had a spike and a few raghorns and a smaller 6-point bull. And the bigger bulls hadn't moved in to take over the herd yet. So it's just kind of these dinky guys that were just kind of moving around. And I remember we called one, and this cow came out because she was trying to find the herd. And so I was just trying to keep my wind out of her face. And she luckily just went right past me. And but when she went past me, I think she may have been in heat a little bit, because then all of a sudden these bulls that were downwind of her just started cracking off. And it was kind of interesting. It was pretty cool. You get awesome. Like the hair on the back of your neck standing up, and you're like ready to go. And then like the worst thing happens. Like this little raghorn bull comes up, and he starts sniffing around. And I know that usually I don't have the restraint to not shoot. I shoot whatever, is in front of me, but I saw the 6-point right at the edge of where I could see. And he went back into the timber, and the smaller bull was up sniffing around. And I come back around trees so that this big bull can't see me. And I call the little bull, and he keeps coming, and he keeps, digging into my business. And so I'm like, well, this is not good. I'm going to have to shoot this bull, or I'm going to have to just come at it another day. And as I'm thinking that, I'm like, well, I'll probably just come out another day. And I look up again, and he's right there, like 15, 20 yards away. And I'm like, crap. And he knows that it's me. He knows what I am, and he just takes off. And then I remember this little episode that I watched with Paul, and he was like, you know what? If one does that to you, just act like a bigger bull and chase him. And I'm like, there's no way this is going to work, but I've already busted him, so I might as well. So I start screaming, and I chase him off. And then the bigger bull comes up to that same spot to investigate and see, what was going on. And I had no idea that he was going to be doing this. And I was raking. And at first I had myself set up in a really good spot to shoot. I had my lanes picked out. I had my ranges. But then remember, I backed around into the trees so he couldn't see me. And he came up to me in those trees, and he sat in the same spot that smaller bull sat, but I didn't have a shot.
Oh, no.
I know, just lessons learned. That was just so stupid. And I was kicking myself and I was like, well, crap. I mean, maybe I could thread it through, but it's probably not a good idea. And so he also saw me and ran off. And I was like, man, that was just not fortunate.
Oh man, that's funny though. Now, you know how
it-
often stories end up where the person's like, "Man, if I had just stayed put."
I know,
It's
or
like
like,
every other story ends up with that exact sentence.
it's a dilemma of the soul of an elk hunter. I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's inescapable, but that was pretty pitiful. Especially because I just learned, and when that smaller bull came up to me, I was like, I'm not going to be able to shoot him from here anyways. I'm just trying to get him off my tail, and then I stay there. That's the worst part. The worst part is I purposefully stayed there and did that. And a few days later, we went in and we tried a different spot, and I learned from that experience a little bit, a
Yeah.
little bit. And I'm with my dad this time, and we're going down into kind of right up against a wilderness area, so you couldn't drive in or anything like that. And there are tons of hunters, and we're like, crap, this is not ideal. There's just, you throw a stick and there's somebody there. And we're like, well, where should we go? So we find this just hole at the bottom of this ravine that's just so thick and so nasty. But at the bottom of it, there was an old logging road. So we're like, well, we'll just hike to the bottom of it and walk the logging road and see what's down there. And so we go down there and we get to the road. We start walking around, and I start calling for this. My dad and I were doing this kind of a sequence where my dad is the cow, the lead cow, and a couple other cows, and I'm the bull in the back. And we keep 20 yards distance between us, and we start doing that routine while as we're walking down the logging road to see if anything will make itself known. And this big bull, and it sounded like a dinosaur, just bugled one time, and we were like, oh yes, this is it. And he comes in to investigate, and he sees me raking a tree. I didn't hide myself good enough, and I'm like, crap. And he is like huge. This is like the biggest bull that I've seen on public land. It was just huge.
Yeah.
I
If
mean,
you had to
7
give
on
him a
one
score,
side.
what do you think?
Oh, oh man, I hate to do that, but I actually have video of, I think it's the same bull in rifle season, but I would say he's like, I don't know, 380.
Woo, that's a big bull.
He's a big toad
Yeah.
for this area. I mean, that's monster. And so we're there, and he's looking at me, and I've got the stick in my hand, and I'm like, well, crap, what do I do now? And he just turns around and runs off. And so my dad and I, we kept going down the logging road, and we start calling again. And then we stop, and we're like, well, should we try to chase after that big bull and see if we can get him or not? And we're talking in a normal voice, like just having an everyday conversation. And all of a sudden, my dad sees on the hill these antlers that are just walking through the bush. And he points up to it, and I get myself in a good position, and I get myself ranged up, and he steps out, but you can't see his the kill zone yet, but he's broadside. And so we're just waiting for him to take one more step, just
How many
one
yards
more step.
roughly? Like 30, 40?
He was 45
Okay.
to 50.
Gotcha.
And we're just like, one more step, just take one more step. And he takes one step back. And we're like, oh no. And then my dad throws, or I mean, not throws, but starts raking, and then throws a stick. And he takes 2 steps forward, and I'm able to pull back the bow, and I shot, and he went down and then tried to get back up. And so I shot him again, and then he just kind of rolled over and died. That was
Oh,
pretty neat.
that's awesome. So was that the 380 or is that a separate bull?
That was a different bull, but
Okay, that was what I was gonna say. Okay, that's still awesome though to have that kind of experience, man.
yeah, he's crazy. I mean, it was a 5-point bull, but his eye guards were like 22.5 inches long.
No shit.
They were
That's
the
crazy.
biggest eye guards I've ever seen on a 5-point bull. So I don't know. Maybe it was the son. I'll have to come back for the father.
Yeah. How many seasons ago was this?
This was 2 seasons ago.
Okay, yeah, that big guy's probably still there,
Yeah,
still haunting that logging road, man.
yeah, I know. Those big ones, they hide a lot closer than people think to roads.
I hear it, man.
But yeah.
It's funny driving in Colorado going hunting. Like I drive up and over the Eisenhower Tunnel, which is like the main tunnel going on I-70 east and westbound. And all year long, there's no cars parked on the side of it. But hunting season, all of a sudden, you just got guys just pulling over on the side of the highway and just hiking up into the woods. And granted, there's not many other ways to get in there. So I get it, but I'm sure that they're seeing plenty of elk right there. I've never pulled
Oh yeah.
over, but I thought about it. I thought about it a bunch of times. So
Yeah. Yeah.
cool, man. Well, so was that your first archery kill with your dad, or was that just one of the
That
14
was just
archery
one of
kills
them.
with your dad? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it, man. Got it. Well, what have you done any hunting other than elk, or is that really your main thing?
That's my main thing, but I've got a pretty funny story of a deer hunt that I did one time.
Muley or whitetail?
Muley.
Okay, let us have it, man.
And okay, let's see. Let's start the conversation by saying this is a unit that you have to put in a few years for, like 3 years
Okay.
for. And so I put in for it. I got the tag and I went up to go hunt, and the unit is almost all in wilderness area. So you can't drive in it. You got to walk in it, just you or horses or whatever. And so my dad and I are like, we want to try that backcountry backpacking experience.
Yeah.
So opening day, we get up there and we start driving, and it's really early in the morning. It's like 4:30 in the morning. You can kind of see where the sun is going to come up, but it hasn't come up quite yet. And once we get to the top of the mountain where we're going to backpack into, the sun is now in full shooting light. And so we start driving along to the hill, and we've got probably like 300 yards or 400 yards to the trailhead. And right there, right before we step out of the truck, is this monster buck just sitting there. And we're like, no freaking way. And we're like, well, this is like, do we put our backpacks on, get out of the truck, and then shoot it, so then we can at least say that we did it with backpacks on our back? Or do we? I mean, it's just, but like, yeah, I mean, what can you do at that point?
Yeah, you take what's given to you, man. You play the cards you're dealt, right?
So he runs down the hill, and he's sitting there like 220 yards away maybe. And I shot him, and we just drove the truck right next to him, loaded him up, and was done. But like my biggest deer I've ever shot, and the backcountry experience that I applied for never came to fruition because we drove right up to it. It's
That's
pretty.
awesome. Have you had any backcountry experience since then, or was that just like the one trip you planned and it just haven't gotten back to it?
Not for deer, man. That just kind of ruined the backcountry deer experience for me.
That's funny. It's
I've
funny you mentioned that. I've not done much mule deer hunting, but the biggest mule deer I've ever seen was literally like driving into my elk spot. So and I didn't have a tag this particular year, but I'm driving in, and the road just like basically goes down, takes a hard right, and then U-turns back and like drops down, just a big old switchback. And in the bottom of the switchback, there's just a giant mule deer just sitting there. So it's like I drove basically a circle around this deer and was like, man, if only I had a tag. And he was easily the biggest mule deer I've ever seen. And I've seen plenty of big mule deer. But yeah, it's just funny how it works out that way.
I know, like they're so. I mean, you hear like Steven Ranella or the Meat Eater talk about mule deer, and he's like, they're just so majestic and smart. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I've driven on to some really stupid big bucks, but yeah,
I don't know anything
it's
about
pretty
them
fun.
being majestic or smart, but man, they look when they start doing that little hop. I don't remember what that's called, but man, it
Oh
just
yeah,
makes me giggle every time. It's like the dumbest thing an animal can do in the
I
woods.
know.
You know,
I
it's
know.
such
It's
a
like I'm gonna run away from you in the most graceful way possible.
yeah. I'm gonna skip away from danger. It's just funny. It's a funny thing to see. If you've never seen a mule deer, and there is a specific term for it, but basically they just like hop. Which makes for interesting tracks. But if you've never seen them do it, man, get out there into the West and check out some mule deer hopping because
It's
it's
something else.
friendly. I don't know what to tell you. It's just makes me smile every time I see it. I'm not upset when a mule deer hops away because it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, Thomas, you got any more for us? Otherwise, you've given us plenty. You tell me, man. If you got more stories, I'd love to hear them.
Let's see. I don't know. I mean, I've got some pretty funny bird hunting stories, but I don't really have a whole lot of other ones that are worth entertaining.
Well, why
At
don't you
least.
give me one bird story, and then we'll wrap it up. What do you say? And then we'll talk a little bit about Vior.
All right. So, um, I like to hunt for upland game like pheasants and quail. We got quite a few of them around here, and I remember I went out with my little brother this time, and he's probably 16. I'm like 18 or 20, and he's out there with me. It's one of his first bird hunts ever. And if you've ever pheasant hunted before, you have come across a point in time where you almost step on one because they just hold right there until you just about step on their tail feathers. And I remember my brother came up on this pheasant and he steps on it and actually steps on the tail feathers and pins that bird to the ground. And then it gets out and it starts flying up around. And he, instead of shooting it, picks up a rock next to him and throws it at this bird. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, shoot that thing. And he's like, I thought a rock would be faster.
Did he
And
have it
so
in
I'm
his
just,
hand already, or did he like reach down and grab it off the ground?
no, he reached down and grabbed a rock to throw at this bird. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you've got a gun in your hand. And yeah, the bird got away. And I just, I think we may have packed up ship right there and went back because it
That's so
scared the
funny,
crap
man.
out of him.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So I was elk hunting one year, and this is a November elk hunt. And like having a terrible year. The wind, it's like the high is 20, and like we're camping, so it's cold, and we're in a wall tent, and I think there's a burn ban. So like we can't even start a fire. So it's just a miserable year. And again, what I remember is the cold was bad, but the wind is what really just got me. And I'm walking through some dark timber because I'm like, at least it gives me reprieve from the wind. And I see a grouse, and I'm rifle hunting for elk. So I'm like, well, I have a 270. I'm not going to shoot a grouse with my 270. So I'm like looking for rocks and sticks to throw at this bird. 'Cause I'm like, I'm going to kill something. I've got my small game tag. So I reach down and I find a rock, and I'm like literally, John Elway trying to just ping this bird with this rock. So, I didn't have a shotgun, otherwise I would have killed it, unlike your brother. But I know how he felt to try to throw a rock at a bird because I've been there, man. I've been there.
He was trying to kill two birds with one stone.
Exactly, yeah. Needless to say, my bird, got away before I even threw anything. It just I knew something was up. And since then, I picked up a small 22 because I always run into small birds when I have large caliber rifles. So I have a small 22 just to get dinner for the night. So
yeah,
cool, man.
yeah, no,
Well,
same thing.
That's a good one. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I do the same thing when I bow hunt for elk. I always have a judo point on one of my arrows, and I have one of those Easton like Full Metal Jacket indestructible arrow. I call it. It's like that's my bird arrow. Everybody
Yeah.
makes fun of me for having a bird arrow, but I can't not have a bird arrow.
Yeah. I mean, it's like Randy Newberg. Randy Newberg will have like a $60 arrow and just chuck him at grouse. He doesn't care.
Yeah,
He'd go grouse hunting over elk hunting. So it's fun. It's a
that
fun
is
thing to
pretty
do.
fun.
Yeah. Cool, Thomas, man. Well, I want to say thank you again for sharing your stories with us, man. They're a lot of fun. I think we heard like 3 elk stories, so I know you got at least 14 more for us, maybe another day. But for now, let's tell the people about Vior and like why we're doing this podcast so quickly, so urgency. You have a pretty awesome giveaway, so give us some details on. Before we get into the giveaway, what is Vior? Where'd the name come from? What are you trying to do? Let's start there.
Yeah, so Vior came from 3 of us, and we actually met in the Philippines. Funny enough,
Yeah.
and it's actually a really funny story. So we were rooming together in the Philippines, and if you've ever seen The Princess Bride, they have those giant rats. The
in that
Philippines
in the
has those
forest
rats.
where the flames are coming up. Yeah.
The Philippines has those rats. Like you go to the markets there, and these rats fight dogs for scraps.
Wow.
They kill cats. I mean, they're like, I mean, you can find some that are like a foot long, not including the tail. You know,
Jeez.
there's massive rats. And I remember you're sitting there, and we have concrete floors, and we would guard our food at night from these rats with these like aluminum tent pole type things. So we'd sleep on the floor, and we'd kill these rats in the middle of the night so that they wouldn't get in all of our food.
Okay. Yeah.
And I remember one night we started talking, and we were like, this is a weird, twisted kind of hunting. And then we started talking about hunting back home. And we were like, you know what? We should do this when we get back home. We should start a system where we're able to go hunting all the time and share it with people, because we all really liked Born and Raised Outdoors. They were kind of like the motivating factor for us to want to go out. Their slogan is like educate, entertain, and inspire, or something like that. And so that's kind of what we wanted to do. So we went from rat hunting to where we are now.
You mind saying that again, man? My audio broke out. But you went from
You're
rat
good.
hunting to what?
To where we are now, which is
Okay.
I guess we're just now starting launched and ready to go. But
Cool,
what we're going to try to do.
Where did the name come from? I want to start with that.
Oh,
did
yeah.
Vior? Yeah.
So Vior is Nordic for the hunter.
Okay. Very cool.
So for no particular reason, we just chose to do something that was like a little bit, ancient and traditional, but wanted it to be something that was a little bit memorable, a little bit different than some of the other options that we could have come up with.
Cool. That's awesome. I like it. And so you guys, you told me a little bit about this before we started recording, but you're kind of doing a interesting thing where you're like ramping up large before you even start. So go into that a little bit, and then tell the people about your giveaway, man. And we'll
yeah.
get some
So
people registered for that.
I like marketing. That's another one of my day jobs. And so we do this thing called a reactive startup. And what it is it's a way for a business to get capital, so that you can have capital to start the business.
Yeah.
So it requires a lot of time, but not a lot of money. And so that's what we opted to do. And we contacted a whole bunch of companies, big companies, and asked them if they would be willing to donate in exchange for the email list that we create for this giveaway. And that's all it is. That's all it is we're just collecting an email list, and then everybody who enters into the giveaway can win some of these prizes. And we have actually a lot of prizes. I think we have like $4,000 in prizes, $5,000 in prizes. So it's a pretty substantial giveaway, and it's free to enter. So that's kind of how we're starting to hope, in the hopes of gaining some viewership before we launch. And then
Yeah.
we'll start selling like classes. We'll start selling them. And our goal is to sell the most value for the least price. Like I know
Yeah.
a lot of other courses out there, like $100 for a year-long subscription or something like that. We want to charge like $10, and you get to choose 2 courses per year. And
That's
you can
awesome.
change after every year. We want to make it accessible, and we want to hunt in all 50 states. We have a project that we're launching called the Big 50, and we're going to hunt in and fish in all 50 states. It's going to take us like 5-6 years. But we want to show everybody across the nation that hunting is accessible and it's everywhere, and there's lots of opportunities to go and do it. And it's not that hard, or it doesn't even have to be that expensive to start.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, I'll help you out down here in Texas. I think my listeners know that I moved from Colorado to Texas recently. I don't have a lease yet, but I'm working on it. And as soon as I do, Thomas, man, you're welcome to come down and help me shoot some hogs. I think you can probably teach me a thing or two, even though
Yeah.
you've probably never been hog hunting.
Yeah, we're
But
going
that's
to be
cool,
going
man.
down in June, actually, with the Ranch Fairy, if you've ever heard of him.
Oh yeah, no, I have. It's another guy I've been meaning to reach out to. I met him briefly at Dan Staten's Elk Shape Camp in 2022, and he was talking, of course, about heavy arrows.
Yeah, that's what we're testing. We're testing arrows and broadheads.
That's cool, man. That's cool. So, so tell people how they can enter your contest and when people are being drawn, and then when, of course, you guys are going live with some of the content that you're putting out, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
Yeah. So the giveaway started Thursday, and it goes till April 7th.
Gotcha.
And there's a link in all the companies that are participating, or you could go to our page, VR Outdoors, and Instagram, and I got a link there. You just click it, put your name in, your email, and you're done. And
Perfect.
that's it.
And I'll go ahead and put a link to that in my show notes, so anyone who's listening, just click on the episode, and you'll be able to click right there and register for the giveaway. I actually skipped one thing, Thomas. What is in the giveaway? What are the people possibly going to win?
So we have a full backpack loadout from Rockman Waterproof. And that also comes with a bino case, a waterproof bino case, and a waterproof rifle case that clips right into the backpack. It's a really cool system. Cool. I've never seen anything like it. But that's a really cool system. That's the grand prize winner, and they're also going to win Tooth of the Arrow broadheads, the Morel dice foam target, their high roller target, an Elk Nut app subscription. And I think that's it for the grand prize. The second place winner is going to win a full set of scree camo, head to toe, jackets, gloves, nice. The whole thing, and an Elk Nut subscription. Third place is going to win 12 of Easton's brand new Sonic 6.0 arrows. Fourth place is Onyx subscription, an Elite Onyx subscription. Fifth place is 6 broadheads from Tooth of the Arrow.
Nice.
And then 7th, 8th, and 9th place are going to be Elk Nut.
Everybody wins.
There's going to be 10 winners. So 7th, 8th, and 9th place are Elk Nut app subscriptions. And then 10th place is going to be a subscription to our master classes. You'll get to choose any courses that you want, any 2.
Awesome, man. Well, that's super cool. Well, thank you again for reaching out to me. Thank you, of course, for coming on and sharing your stories. You got some good ones, especially for only being in your early 20s. I wish I had 17 elks under my belt. But man, Thomas, this was fun, man. We'll stay in touch. And guys, I'm going to post everything about all of this on my Instagram and in the show notes. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Thomas at Vior. So thank you, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. Thanks for having me. And if they want to do future giveaways, we have one coming out, a rifle one and a fly fishing one coming out before July.
Awesome. Oh yeah, and when are you actually going to start putting out not only like your
The
classes,
master classes,
but your
our other content.
but your other content? When that rolling out?
So we're working on the content right now. We have an ice fishing trip that's coming out, and we've got some turkey hunts that are underway, and that will be happening like within the week or
Okay.
next week.
Awesome. Cool. Well, guys, we're on the ground floor here. Enjoy what Thomas and his and your team are putting out. I haven't met any of the other guys, but I'm sure you guys are going to gonna do something cool. So I appreciate it, man. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys, that's it. Another couple stories in the books. I want to thank Thomas, of course, for coming on the podcast. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, from when he first reached out to me till we were recording was like less than 16 hours. So usually doesn't happen that quickly. And so get out there and sign up for his contest. There's a lot of great prizes and a lot of people win. So 10 winners, not just the typical like 1, 2, or 3. So lots of stuff out there. And so all the links you need are in the show notes. So just go ahead and look below, follow VR Outdoors, follow Thomas and his buddies. Make sure you register for the podcast. And then as important as any of that stuff is share our podcast. If you want other people to enter, send them this. Have them listen. Hopefully they listen to some additional stories as well. And we hear hear from some of those folks as to some of the great stories that they have that they want to share on the podcast. So that's it, guys. Again, thank you, Thomas, for coming on the podcast and sharing your stories. And thank you all very much for listening. Now go out there and make some stories of your own. Thank you.